How many of you know someone that has died from the polio virus? When was the last time you heard of someone that had polio? Let us journey to a time when there was no polio vaccine and many people contracted and died from the polio virus. In 1952, polio officially became a national crisis when nearly 60,000 people became infected with polio. The search for a polio vaccine was a focal point for many doctors in the United States. Luckily for us, Dr. Jonas Salk was one of those doctors who dedicated his time and research to the creation of a polio vaccine. In order to help you put a face to the name of Dr. Jonas Salk, here's a picture of him inoculating a young girl. With decades passed since the polio epidemic, many people forget the importance of creations such as the polio vaccine. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved and will continue to be saved due to the creation of the polio vaccine. Also, one must think that some of us wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the creation of the polio vaccine. In an attempt to enlighten you, I will first discuss some of the aspects of Dr. Salk's early life, such as where he was from, what schools and universities he attended, and some of his accomplishments. Second, I will describe how polio affects the human body. Third, I will signify the dramatic decrease in polio cases in the United States. To conclude, I will explain how Dr. Salk committed one of the most selfless acts in American history by not getting a patent on his polio vaccine. Let's begin by discussing the early life of Dr. Jonas Salk. Jonas Edward Salk was born on October 28, 1914, in New York City. Jonas attended the City College of New York and then the New York University School of Medicine. After graduating from New York University School of Medicine in 1938, Salk started working with microbiologist Thomas Francis Jr. Together, they would create a vaccine for influenza that would be used for military troops in World War II. I found this information on Dr. Salk's early life at www.web.mit.edu. While pursuing a research fellowship at the University of Michigan in 1942, Jonas soon became the assistant professor of epidemiology. In 1947, Dr. Salk was continuing his research of epidemiology and teaching as head professor at the University of Pittsburgh. While working his way up from a community college, Jonas Salk progressed from an assistant professor of epidemiology at the University of Michigan to head professor of epidemiology at the University of Pittsburgh. Furthermore, let's continue by discussing the effects of polio on the human body. From the website AmericanInventor.com, I learned that polio attacks the nerve cells and periodically the central nervous system that in effect can cause paralysis or even death. This picture displays the muscles that are most commonly affected by polio. According to an article by Harold Schmeck of the New York Times, nearly 3,000 people died from the polio epidemic in 1952. As you can see from this graph, this bar represents the peak of polio in the United States in 1952, with the dark line representing the number of cases in the United States and the lighter line representing the number of deaths from polio. Also, this picture below is a polio treatment center that was conducted in 1952. Dr. Jonas Salk developed a trial vaccine in 1952, but it wouldn't be until 1954 that it would be successfully used on over 2 million school children. Dr. Salk gained national fame after creating a successful polio vaccine, as you can see as he's headlined on Time magazine and also a newspaper. In 1955, there were nearly 30,000 cases of polio in the U.S. By 1957, the number of polio cases dramatically decreased to 6,000, thus solidifying Dr. Salk as one of the most important inventors in American history. Jonas Salk refused to get a patent on his polio vaccine because he wanted it to be freely and widely distributed to all Americans. According to Forbes.com, Dr. Jonas Salk could have profited nearly $7 billion if he had gotten a patent on his polio vaccine. The selflessness of Dr. Jonas Salk will be idolized and recognized by the well-informed for years to come. Polio became the biggest threat in America in 1952. Through dedication and hard work, Dr. Jonas Salk created a polio vaccine that would ultimately save thousands of lives. From junior college to university, Dr. Jonas Salk did what he needed to receive the proper education to become a successful doctor. With close to 60,000 infected Americans with polio in 1952, Dr. Salk dedicated his time to the creation of a polio vaccine. By 1957, the number of polio cases in the U.S. had drastically decreased to 6,000. In order to ensure that the polio vaccine was widely and freely distributed to all Americans, Dr. Jonas Salk refused to get a patent on his polio vaccine. It is estimated that he missed out on $7 billion by not getting a patent. My goal for this speech is to give a general understanding of Dr. Salk and to signify the importance of the creation of a polio vaccine. In order to fully understand the true greatness of Dr. Salk and the monumental significance of the polio vaccine, one must branch out and research more on Dr. Salk and polio. I used www.salk.edu to find this information. In the last few years of Dr. Salk's life, he was working on a cure for the AIDS virus. Sadly, he died before ridding the world of another killer virus. What does this say about his character? It only solidifies that Dr. Salk had one concept in mind, and that is to help people. More specifically, he sought to help sick people who needed a medical answer to a surreal epidemic that killed thousands. Only in death would Dr. Jonas Salk cease to help the living.